to the Daily Objective, brought to you by the Ayn Rand Center UK, where we apply the philosophy of objectivism to pretty much everything. I hope you're getting used to our new time slot here at 9:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, whatever that means for you elsewhere in the world. We have the untitled show, but I'll call it the Daily Collective, coming up immediately after this, and I'll of course announce that later on. But today we have a topic that we've sort of done before, but we're going to refresh this because I think there's a dominant ethics in our society today that approves of hitting Nazis. All right, so the topic of the show today is, should you hit a Nazi? And before I introduce James Valliant, my beloved co-host, to unpack this for us, I want to say just this. Should you feel like hitting a Nazi? Absolutely. Your values, if you're a freedom-loving individual, should be offended on every level by a Nazi. It's a startling phenomenon to me that anybody thinks there is actually any version of collectivism that isn't offensive to the soul and harmful to the soul. So should you want to do that? Sure. Whether or not you should actually strike a Nazi is contextual. And I think in this respect, objectivists have a unique perspective. Maybe James will disagree with me. The context for me is, do you live in a free society or do you not? And if you do not live in a free society, then striking out at those people who have legal command over your life, I think, is legitimate, because those people have no claim to legitimacy as a government. If you live in a free society and a Nazi is holding up a sign proclaiming his stupid ass point of view, you do not have the right to strike him. Provided he is not initiating force against you, you have no authority to do that to him. Now, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Valliant and see what his perspective is, see if there's any differences with respect to his perspective, because, hey, we're objectivists, but we're not like a monolith. We have our own minds, we have our own takes on things, and we have a pretty diverse point of view about lots of topics. So, James, what say you about this? Should you hit a Nazi?
No, you shouldn't hit a Nazi. And I agree with you entirely. I think the only part where I might hold back or have a little asterisk or a qualification to it is want to hit. When I hear a Nazi talk, what I want to do, in effect, is expose his idiocy and evil, to show what a murderous monster he is in his soul. But he's not yet doing anything violent, so I don't yet want to do violence. My wanting to do violence, my emotions I've aligned with my abstract principles here. And so I don't yet want to do violence, even though I admit it, there are times, there are occasions when, oh God, I want to do violence because what he said was so awful and offensive. But the truth is, and this, thank goodness, is the standard law of the United States and is the traditional common law approach. And I provided in the links standard jury instruction on this matter in criminal cases. Words alone, no matter how offensive, and I have to go very, very slow there, and I've explained this hundreds of times to real juries as a prosecutor. Words alone, no matter how offensive, are never a justification for physical force or violence. Full stop, period. And the Supreme Court has been very consistent on this. You cannot use the N-word. The N-word is just an offensive, disgusting collectivist remark in my word. But morally speaking, should you use the N-word, especially to an African-American? I don't like it. It's really bad when you know American history. On the other hand, does that justify violence? Can a bunch of white supremacists start yelling the N-word, and would that justify African Americans from taking violence? The Supreme Court has said no. Well, conservatives had another case. I'm burning a flag right in front of veterans. Here's a U.S. flag. I know you guys have risked your lives for this very symbol. And so right in your face, I'm going to burn this flag. Is that a justification for our conservative veterans to do violence? No, on neither side. In fact, I have another link there to a legal article. The Supreme Court has gone out of its way to say there is no hate speech exception to the First Amendment's guarantee of freedom of speech. You have a right to say whatever offensive, nonsensical, untrue things you say, with certain few exceptions. One, defamation, copyright violations, or what they call fighting words. And fighting words have a very, very narrow definition. It cannot be, I am going to, do something next week, or I'm thinking about doing something. No, it has to be immediate, and it has to be credible, and it has to be right now. So I'm talking to a mob and I say, let's go get that guy over there. He's a Nazi. Let's go beat him up. That is the sort of incitement to violence. It's actually part of an act of violence. If it can credibly stimulate a direct act of violence. So for example, I'm giving you some other examples. If I come to you and I say, I'll pay you $1 million if you kill someone for me, and I'm serious about it, I've already committed a crime. It's not a violation of my free speech because it's actually part of an act of violence. Similarly, a conspiracy to commit a real act of violence. If I'm serious, I'm planning with you how to blow up some building where there's people at. That conspiracy, those words can also be part of a crime of conspiracy without violating the First Amendment. But we as objectivists have a distinct and unique view of rights. They are a single unity. Unfortunately, our Supreme Court does not agree with us here. They think of freedom of speech over here in a totally separate category, and your freedom to say against being a victim of violence over here. So violence and self-defense is a right over here, and free speech is a right over here, and they're in conflict, and we have to balance them. Well, that's total nonsense. Only if rights take someone's property against their will, or actually are part of an act of force, should they ever be restricted. Freedom of speech is part of our wider freedom of liberty and cannot be understood outside of the rest of our liberties, if that makes sense.
I gotta say, I'm super happy you clarified the concept of fighting words, because I actually wrote here in my notes, I was going to put it up on the chat, fighting words, because I've heard lots of people make the claim that this is a justification for violence, and they conflate that with, I'm offended, I now can fight you because you're saying something offensive to me, and I can justify that because there's a legal principle called fighting words. Well, you just made that very distinct, a great distinction there, which is immediate threat. It's an incitement to violence that allows you. So that means force has already been initiated. You're simply defending yourself against the possibility of a threat. That's very interesting. But before you go on, I want to deal with the very first concept that you had issues with me about. I think it's totally appropriate to have feelings of rage, and as a man, and perhaps as a woman, to want to lash out physically against something evil and malignant and unjust. I think where your philosophy comes in is you don't follow those feelings and impulses. You understand that you still have to deal with people as sovereign beings, and you must attempt to persuade that person and or expose their ideas to other rational beings, so that we live at peace with one another. So my philosophy takes precedence over my emotions and directs and guides exactly how I deal with that emotional life.
I totally understand. I talk about sympathy. I mean, it's what I'm saying is that I'm totally sympathetic in one sense. I have automatized in myself that part of philosophy, and I think in my psychology deeply enough that I know I'm not helping out if I'm going to do violence to this Nazi. I'm not fighting his Nazism. I'm not even going to be effective probably with this one Nazi. Even should I knock him to the ground, it's not going to teach him anything. It's not going to move the ball forward. We're not fighting Nazism, which is an ideology, with force. Force is incompetent when it comes to battling an idea as such. And having inculcated that idea so deeply in my psyche, I realized it would be counterproductive to punch a Nazi. It would be counterproductive. It would be kind of stooping to his ideological level.
absolutely.
Confirming Nazism. I wouldn't want to confirm any aspect that violence is justifiable by hitting that Nazi in effect. But I totally psychologically understand your position. Have there been times where I have known cognitively that it wouldn't be right to lash out, but have felt the desire to lash out? Absolutely, I'm a human being. And so I understand it. It is a hateful thing. If I could somehow eradicate it from this planet, I would do so. But violence, I know, would be a counterproductive means of attempting to counter Nazism.
This brings me to another point, because you're just showing me how much more deeply you've integrated these principles than I have, in the sense that you don't have them. That's you've integrated them so deeply that impulse to do what I would like to do, it isn't even there yet, because you understand fully and contextually what that means. I understand it.
When I see a swastika mark, what I'm seeing is this guy telling most people that he is an idiot and asshole.
Absolutely. I see the same thing, except I still have that gut level reaction where I would like to just choke you out right now, but I'm going to be guided by these other principles.
I'll tell you, if it involved my wife or kids or something, I don't think anything could override the impulse that you have there. If you start totally understand it.
That's just you protecting your values, which I find to be very noble. Hey, we have a couple super chats real fast. Ashley shrugged for $1.99. See Mark's new reality check, Re-Racism. Excellent. Thank you for the plug, Ashley shrugged.
It was brilliant. I had to share it in a couple of places on social media, Mark. She's absolutely right. It's utterly brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope, Ashley, I see you at MomentoCon in Pittsburgh. And maybe a couple of commies will show up, and we'll head over to Stout MMA and see what they got going. Kiana Pellegrino, see, there I go again. Kiana Pellegrino with $5. Unless a Nazi is harming you, or you see a Nazi harming someone else, no, you should not hit them. Hi, Dad. What's up? Great thinking. That's why you're awesome, Kiana.
You must be a good dad. She is right on the money there, Dad.
Well, she's responsible for her own thinking, and she does it all on her own. But I can't take any credit for that. So yeah, and the reason we're talking about this is because it seems like increasingly a larger and larger percentage of young folks, not Kiana, because her head is on straight, but other young folks in her age group think that force and violence are an appropriate way to deal with things that they disagree with. In fact, in some respects, they don't make the connection, as you've said. They also don't understand that what they're doing is using force against someone else. Now, how can we as objectivists combat this very stubborn tendency on the part of young people to think that violence is okay if something is abhorrent to them?
Well, I myself was having a conversation the other day with a young university undergrad. He's no student of objectivism. It was in the context of my religious studies life. So he is a Bible scholar. So I was interested in talking to him for that purpose. But during the course of our conversation, he made it very plain that he thinks it's perfectly all right when you're triggered, when someone says something. For example, if someone happened to be transgender, and if someone misgendered him, he would be offended, and that would be perfectly justifiable force. Look at this guy's an antediluvian knuckle dragger who won't acknowledge that I'm transgender. We absolutely have a right to be violent against him. Or if I'm triggered in some other way, if I have some conservative professor who's telling me something that bothers me about, economics or history, I have a right to be violent. We have a right to protest. And look at what was the 2020 Black Lives riots all about. It's true they were complaining about police violence, but does that allow you to do violence against innocent third parties? Never, ever, ever. Does that let you throw bricks at strangers, set buildings on fire? No, 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 no. Look, the Food and Drug Administration kills. One of the issues you pointed out, lots and lots of people. By that logic, we could have violent demonstrations against the FDA for all of the lives that they cost. I would say no.
Wait a minute. Now, that's an interesting thing you're bringing up now, because now we're talking about a government agency that is preventing people from from living, from procuring
Right.
medications or or experimenting on themselves, being willing participants in some kind of procedure that could save their lives. So that is an active force against them. So it's
That's
not,
right.
it doesn't seem the same kind of logic to me.
Bring it up on purpose for that purpose. Government initiates force. Ayn Rand is suggesting a moral revolution, even more profound than the moral revolution that eliminated slavery in the civilized world, at least legally speaking. She is saying no initiation of force. Neither conservatives nor liberals have ever, I mean, lefty liberals, have never grasped this concept about force. They all and both believe that the initiation of some force by government is okay. So we have initiations of force by government all over the place. Do those initiations of force, even when they're totally wrong, even if they kill people, Mark, do they allow us to go violently to burn down the Food and Drug Administration and have a violent act, block roads, throw bricks at strangers? No. We have in the United States, however much force the government is using, I have to have a clear principled line at which I will say when it's okay to take up arms against my government. If we don't have a censorship, if we have basic due process, if we have a means to peacefully change the system and persuade people, I say we cannot initiate force against innocent people, have violent riots, violate other people's rights. That is not okay.
Or retaliate against, say, the FDA in a violent way. Now, I believe this is the objectivist perspective, which I fully embrace. But now we are in a situation where freedom of speech is in jeopardy. It is in jeopardy by particularly the left, but the right has no issue with violating speech and controlling speech now. We also have a system of due process which is demonstrably tainted, which is demonstrably corrupt, as we could see in the Hunter Biden case that's going on now. We see that two-tier justice system that the left tells us about. They rant about it in wrong ways, but it actually does exist. If you are in this political echelon, if you are in a political establishmentarian, the chances of you being prosecuted and held accountable to laws in the same way that a normal citizen would be are next to nothing. Somebody who has done what Hunter Biden has done would be in jail, and somebody who has participated in these kinds of conspiracies the way his father has allegedly done, I know this is the topic that we might have talked about but didn't, should also be prosecuted and put in jail. Now, this just doesn't go for the left, it goes for the right as well. Trump should. All these people who are corrupt have to be subject to the law. That's what equality before the law.
I had a prescient 8-year-old Facebook memory come up the other day where I was saying Hillary Clinton should be prosecuted for her transmission of labeled top secret information and her subsequent destruction of the evidence when asked for it under subpoena. And I said, if we don't prosecute her, as the FBI director said, no reasonable prosecutor would at some point, then I said at the time, then equal justice under the law is history. Now, Trump wasn't even on the political scene when I made that post 8 years ago. It turned out to be prophetic. It is on both sides. Yeah, there's no question that this was a corrupt deal. There's no question the DOJ is deeply in the tank. The irregularities there were all over the place. But, Trump himself, as you say, I think that he lied about his top secret documents too. So it's not a partisan issue. But getting back, and boy, that would be an issue I think that we could discuss from a uniquely objectivist perspective. But you look at something like DeSantis going after the parent company of Anheuser-Busch because of the Bud Light ads using the transgender model. That is a violation of free speech, in my view. The economic liberties and civil liberties issue cannot be separated out. So you've got Republicans there, as you pointed out, Republicans since the dawn of time have wanted pornography censored, communists censored if necessary. So for conservatives, I've always never been the big fans of free speech. It's the left who used to, at least, back when I was a child. Now they're thrown in the towel completely, triggering them as justifiable violence with mere words. That's justifiable violence in their minds. I've heard it from the mouths. You hear these polls
lately, where a huge number of young people think that misgendering someone should be a crime. If I call you the wrong pronoun, I should go to jail. Wow.
I've seen it on social media. They think your career should be ruined for misgendering somebody, even if it's an accident, even if it's an accident, even if it's unintentional to them. Just the mere fact that they're offended is enough to ruin your life. Well, it's clear to me that the left used to be anti-establishment, and so they were on the sides of these freedoms. But once they become the establishment, which they clearly are now, they're the dominant ones in the establishment. Once they become that, it's about the rights become flexible concepts that they'll promote when it serves them, and they will not when it doesn't serve them. You can see this now in the Capitol hearings on transgender laws that some states are trying to pass. Suddenly, the left is all about private relationships and private transactions between parents and doctors and children and doctors, whereas before they can't do anything but interfere in those kinds of relations. So in this particular event, they're all about private transactions.
Absolutely. And it is a question of whether they agree with the speech or not now, whether it's free speech. And that's the disturbing thing. And I guess why I took issue with you the way I did. Psychologically I'm on your side here. On the other hand, it is that very distinction between force and words that is so key, and so it has been so much lost. The actual nature of physical force and what it is, as opposed to any kind of expression, that distinction has been completely collapsed, and it's collapsing all the time, more and more and more. What is the difference between hurting my feelings and physically forcing me? That is intentionally being blurred. That is intentionally being wiped out. And our rights, if our rights are not absolute, this is the other thing. Once our rights were no longer absolutes, once they started getting into this, trade-off discussion of rights, this right trades off with that, we were headed down a path to fascism. That was the formula that necessitates a path towards fascism, because your rights being in conflict, once you admit the idea that rights are in conflict, we're going to violate somebody's rights. It's built into their analysis. So it's a question of whose rights get violated.
Yeah, you can't say rights are inviolable, but that's the same thing as saying, I'm sorry, but. No, one invalidates rights, the other invalidates your apology. There is no but. It is an absolute. It is an absolute. And in that respect, I think objectivists are not just in that respect, but particularly in that respect, we're clear.
Philosophy can't. We have a wonderful constitution, that says protect freedom of speech and freedom of religion. I love that. But you know something? It is no constitution can be a match to the onslaught of philosophy, epistemology, and metaphysics telling us that, they're not absolutes, they're sort of human fictions. And once we go down that path, that subjectivist path, we're doomed. And it was philosophy.
Can I just say also, we don't need the right-wing bullies like DeSantis to come down on Bud Light. The market spoke, and we don't need Matt Walsh to be beating up on Dylan Mulvaney. I find that repulsive, to be honest with you. If Bud Light wants to use Dylan as a sponsor for their product, that's within their rights to do. And you know what? They lost about $1 billion in revenue or something because people were seriously offended by it. And then they tried to make up for it. That's the way the market works, and it's far more just. And nobody gets really hurt. And you don't get guys like DeSantis trying to hurt people, or Matt Walsh, calling Dylan Mulvaney infantile names. I am sick and tired of the way the conservatives do frame the argument, not only frame the argument, but march ahead in such insulting, awful, violent, brutal verbal abuse of people that is just unnecessary to win their.
Unnecessary. As we said in our transgender discussion, look, whatever you think of the issue, there is no reason not to understand the scientific complexities of these and to show compassion to individuals. I mean, that I just don't even get from conservatives. But you're absolutely right. DeSantis, would he have gone after Chick-fil-A if Chick-fil-A had done something conservatively controversial?
Would you say, oh, that's a violation of their fiduciary duties because they're a conservative company? And what if they promoted something conservative? Would that be a violation that maybe hurt their business? Would that be worthy of a lawsuit? But you're right. It is the free market that needs to work. The customer. What this proves is that the customer really is in the power seat in a free market system. It is the customers of Bud Light that Anheuser-Busch were ignoring. And when that happens, they will get the natural consequence. On the other hand, companies have to be free, whether from the DeSantis's on the right or from these trigger-happy, violent, encouraging Antifa leftists on the left. What we have to understand is that free speech is free speech. Stay out. And ultimately, of course, we have to separate economics and government, just as we do religion and government, completely, so that if you have a progressive audience and you a product, they should be free to go to your product. If you have a conservative product, private companies should be free to have political viewpoints.
And we need not polarize the political world in order to achieve that. People just naturally gravitate towards products. The more we know with technology now, the regulatory state becomes even less and less justifiable, because you can get information on companies at the drop of a hat. You can figure out which companies you want to promote and which ones you don't. And it can be up to you. The responsibility for that is entirely in your hands. James, I could talk about this stuff all day with you, of course, but we have to go because another show is hard upon us. But really quickly to say, Ali Beard for $1.99. Thank you, Ali. DeSantis version of cancel culture. Yes, it is. That's exactly what it is. The right starts it. The left does it better. And this is the phenomenon that we're in. So upcoming shows, the Daily Collective is starting at the top of the hour, folks, literally in 4 minutes, right after this show ends. And it's going to be on Charlie Kirk and conservative objectivists. I find that to be a bit of a contradiction in terms, and Charlie Kirk is turning out to be a rather unfortunate fellow. The more I listen to him, the more I actually don't like what he has to say. He's a little scary. Also at 10 p.m. UK time, Life on Earth with Robert Nasir. Love everything Robert has to say. He is a very fascinating person to listen to. Please tune into that. I hope you folks understand what great content you're getting here. James, it's always a pleasure working with you. I love it every time we're together. I could talk to you for 15 hours. Sorry I missed you at Comic-Con, by the way. We could talk about that later. I guess that's it, folks. So from my point of view, just remember to always check your premises. And do you have anything to say, James? Final words?
No, we got great content. Do consider becoming a paid subscriber. This Saturday, we have our third mock trial, and we're going to be putting Just Stop Oil on trial this Saturday, but it's only available to paid subscribers at a certain level. So do become a paid subscriber. This stuff is interesting. We have all kinds of other stuff too, but thank you.
I will be participating,
folks.
Yes, and I will be participating in this from what I understand, right?
Cool. Yeah, I need an expert witness, my friend.
All right, I'll give it a shot. All right, folks. So always check your premises, and we will see you next time. Peace.
Take care.